Okay, so this is a big one. A list that is no doubt going to cause some pretty hefty division amongst us all. But that's what we try to do here at MMADive, get the discussions going. So without further ado, I bring you our top 10 most exciting fighters in UFC history. Number 10, Tony Ferguson. To kick things off, we have one of the greatest lightweight fighters to ever do it. A man whose 12-fight streak of victories between 2013 and 2019 contained within it some of the most electrifying MMA you will ever see. Tony was just blessed with the exact attributes and skills needed to be a total showstopper. Immense cardio, ridiculous recoverability, diverse and creative striking, explosive scrambling, and his wild submission game. It is a real shame that we never did get to see El Cucuy challenging for an undisputed title, but while his form of late has really showcased just how much he was forced to give of himself to be successful, there is no denying that this man was a showman at heart. A natural warrior whose bouts with Edson Barboza, Josh Thompson, Donald Cerrone, Lando Venata, Anthony Pettis, and more gave us thrill after thrill. Number 9, Diego Sanchez. Three-time Fight of the Year winner Diego Sanchez's longevity in the fight game is kind of bonkers. Indeed, he is a zany character. There's no other way to put it. And at this point, I think I can speak for most fans when I say that the dude has nothing more to prove. So many classic bouts over the years displayed his dynamic and exhilarating work on the mat. Just watch his Fight of the Year winning showcase against Karo Parisian, but also his uncoachable toughness, with another pair of Fight of the Year winning bouts with Clay Guida and, for me in particular, his 3-round war with Gilbert Melendez. Sanchez is a pretty soft-spoken guy, but in the heat of battle, something just seems to come over him. It's like he slips into a frenzy. Watching him calling on the great Melendez mid-fight to punch him in the face as he walked forward, almost inviting him to throw down. Diego Sanchez was just built differently, and he has the accolades to show for it. Number 8. Max Holloway. Do I really need to explain this one? Sure, you could make an argument that Max Holloway's game was totally shut down by Alexander Volkanovski, which it was, and maybe that his title defense against Frankie Edgar was more professional than anything else. But Blessed has shown himself to be a very reliable source of irresistibly stylish, high-octane warfare. Whether he's putting a clinic on the likes of Calvin Kattar or Brian Ortega, or engaging in a back-and-forth brawl with Dustin Poirier or Yair Rodriguez, Holloway's offensive capabilities have a habit of dragging his opponent into his style of fight, and that for me was what made Volkanovski's trio of wins so spectacular. He took that fire that Max usually brings and totally quenched it for the most part. Number 7, Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier has very sneakily been working up a resume that contains within it some of the most exciting fighters of all time. Too often we read the name Dustin Poirier on the billing second to the likes of Max Holloway, Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler, Conor McGregor, Anthony Pettis, and so on. But time and time again, the Diamond has managed to outlast some of the most exciting fighters to ever lace up gloves. And he has been doing this for years, rarely losing and generally only doing so in fights against champions. Poirier's pair of wins over McGregor did a good job in letting the world know just how talented he is. But in reality, he has been this good and this unmissable for years now. Number 6, Carlos Condit. The natural-born killer was and is a fighter who well and truly lived up to his moniker. At the height of his powers, he was as good and reliable a finisher as the welterweight division has ever known. In fact, he never managed to win by way of decision until his 28th pro fight. By that time, he had just arrived in the UFC, and from there, finishes of guys like Rory McDonald, Dan Hardy, and Dong Hyun Kim put his name on the map, before he then outpointed Nick Diaz, and then gave the champion George St. Pierre one truly worrying moment in their 5-round fight. But we all know that Condit was consistent, and he was always in entertaining fights, looking for the finish. But I'd add him to this list on the strength of his performance against Robbie Lawler at UFC 195 alone. Sure, Robbie got the nod and there was at least some argument for him, but that was a championship level showing from Carlos Condit, and that round 5 may be the best round of MMA that I've ever seen. On a quick side note, if you're enjoying this content, be sure to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all of our weekly uploads. Number 5, Conor McGregor. Love him or hate him, I don't think there has been a single fight in Conor McGregor's career that wasn't pretty damn good at the very least. The man just attracts a certain level of buzz whenever he competes, something that brings out the best in both him and, in some cases, his opponents. Through his entire 28-fight career, the judges have only been required twice, once in a fight with a young Max Holloway that he tore his ACL in, and the other in his rematch with Nate Diaz, which was probably the most entertaining fight he's ever been in. Indeed, his form of late has left a lot to be desired, but if you hit buy on a Conor Conor McGregor pay-per-view, you are pretty much guaranteed to get a show, and his frankly ridiculous level of consistency in this regard, especially when compared to other pay-per-view draws in combat sports. Yeah, it's pretty commendable. Number 4. Charles Oliveira. The numbers speak for themselves. Charles Oliveira is a finisher with very few equals within the context of MMA history, and his late career resurgence into a championship level attraction was a lesson for us all in our tendency to write off a fighter before they've had their day in the sun. His ability to finish fighters no matter where the action is taking place makes his bouts completely unpredictable, highly frenetic, fast-paced affairs. Dubronx's heart has seen him totally shed his original reputation as someone who can be broken, and though his memorable title reign came to an end at the hands of Islam Makhachev, while it lasted, it was another level of crazy entirely. Oliveira managed to master the chaos that he brings with him to the cage, and even now, despite his age, the miles on his tank, and the strength of the 155-pound division, it would certainly be foolish to count this man out. Number 3. Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler had more than enough crazy showdowns outside of the UFC to warrant his inclusion on any list of exciting fighters within MMA as a whole, but during his first spell in the UFC octagon, and in particular, his rebirth as an elite fighter during his second, Lawler lived up to his ruthless moniker, providing classic after classic at the highest level, proving that even the most diehard brawler within this sport can have the ability to evolve, to become better, to become more refined, while retaining the thing that made them so enthralling to begin with. His matchups with Carlos Condit, Johnny Hendricks have been immortalized at this point, and I would challenge anyone to find me a better 5th round fighter in the entire sport. Number 2. Anderson Silva. Look, we're barely going to mention the couple of boring fights that Anderson Silva did have during his title reign, because to do that would be to miss the point. Anderson in his prime was totally out of this world, a finisher of the highest caliber who brought MMA some of its most iconic images. That 16-fight streak of wins is both the longest win streak in UFC history, and arguably the most unmissable, entertaining run of form that any fighter has been able to extend in the top flight. Silva made great fighters look foolish in there. He finished legends like it was nothing, and he did this all with a level of flair that made you constantly wonder how he could ever continue to get away with it. In the end, he didn't, but while it lasted, there was no one better than the Spider. Okay, so with the first 9 out of the way, it goes without saying that there are going to be more than a few honorable mentions. Champions like Chuck Liddell, TJ Dillashaw, Ronda Rousey, and Brock Lesnar were rarely in anything less than a thriller. Then you have guys who had tremendously entertaining careers as a whole, but not only in the UFC, like Nick Diaz and Wanderlei Silva, guys who are more recent signings such as Yuri Prochazka, Hamza Chimaev, Michael Chandler, and Francis Ngannou, as well as a few other strong candidates in the Korean Zombie Chan Sung-jung, Joe Lozon, John Lineker, Donald Cerrone, Clay Guida, Nate Diaz, Frankie Edgar, Jim Miller, and Mark Hunt. I'm sure I've forgotten a name or two, so be sure to let me know in the comments below if I've made any big omissions. Number 1. Justin Gaethje. Yeah, it's certainly going to be a popular pick, the choice that a lot of fans, especially a lot of new generation fans, will go for. But in my mind, Justin Gaethje's 10-fight run in the UFC has been one of the most perfect displays of an uncompromising dedication to violence that we've ever seen. Remove his loss to Khabib Nurmagomedov from the equation, and you have 10 performance bonuses in 9 outings. His 6-4 UFC record barely begins to describe just how wild this man's rise has been, how much of himself he has given inside the octagon just so he could scratch that itch. The highlight was of course an instant hit after debuting against Michael Johnson, scoring a come-from-behind victory that hinted at everything we would later confirm to be true about this guy. When you think of some of the other names and contenders on this list, different things spring to mind. Oliveira, you think of submissions, finishes, an unlikely champion. With Conor McGregor, your mind goes to fame, money, a left hand. But when it comes to Justin Gaethje, you can use his surname as a means of describing someone who actively invites chaos. And that for me says everything you need to know about this man. Anyway, that will just about do it for this video. But who do you see as the top 5 most exciting fighters in UFC or MMA history? And how do you think I did with my picks? If you do want to help in supporting the channel, liking the video and subscribing would do wonders. Thanks for watching.